Welcome. My name is Nick Elliott, and this is the Focus Life Podcast. I'm the owner and operator of Focus Training here in Jupiter, Florida, and for the last 12 years, I've been inside of the fitness industry and the healthcare industry as a personal trainer, a movement practitioner, and a movement engineer. Now, what I've come to realize is that there are more variables that we need to take into account in regard to our overall existence and how we seek to optimize that, from a day-to-day basis to a weekly outlook to end-of-the-year goals and certain aspirations that we carry with us, whether it's a pursuit for something greater, whether it's more spiritual, mental, emotional. Maybe we want to be able to move more efficiently. Maybe we just want to be able to get through a day with a smile on our face. Whatever the case is, we look to create certain shifts. We look to bridge certain voids or gaps. And episode by episode, as you follow along, I do my best to really connect the dots and provide you actionable steps and resources that you can utilize on a daily basis. Please, and join me on this journey. Let's get this together, the Focused Life. This is episode 6 with the Focus Life Podcast. Our guest today is CJ Kobliska, the Director of Programming with Gimnazo in San Luis Obispo, California. Coming from the West Coast, teaching me what I know here on the East Coast, and the exploration is our tether, okay, that connection point. Now, speaking to today, a tether, the tether that ties it all together. Fiki, feel it, know it. I'm going to throw a bunch more terms at you like that, but essentially what we're getting after is the coil rope. Its origin, its journey into the practice, and how it is now influencing people around the globe to help create balance between left and right side of their body and creating an internal conversation to help them move better and less pain and discomfort showing up. All right, so things to be aware of as we work through today. We do talk about different types of tension in creating heat in the body or generating heat, all right, as a source of priming or a characteristic of priming. We talk about the awareness of the right and left side. We talk about the conversation starter and how you speak to your body. And we talk about the feelings that exist without the terminology. Try not to intellectualize all of the experiences you have physically. Let them just be a physical experience and be with it. And then last but not least, the best part of today's episode is the last 10 minutes is a daily application. We go through it, so get up and move with us. Grab a hand towel, grab a coil rope from the link. If you want to order yours for your home, I promise you it's well worth it. I have had mine for almost 3 years now, and I use it every day. My wife uses it. I had to create more just for her. So look, grab your coil rope from the site, okay? Get your daily application. Until your coil rope shows up, get a hand towel, get a dowel rod, get a broomstick, whatever you can that is light and can connect left to right, okay? Let's get after it here. Episode 6 with CJ Kobliska. All right, y'all. Nick Elliott, all right, the Focus Life Podcast. We are back. I am in the process of getting this episode 6 up and running, and I could not think of anyone better considering the episodes that I've lined up so far and how I've tried to bridge the gap or at least give you tidbits to use from episode 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. I couldn't think of anyone better than CJ Kobliska out in San Luis Obispo and Gimnazo to try and kind of bring in another very resourceful piece of content, a way of moving, a way of being that I think is really beneficial just to honestly the community, whether you're just coming in for a workout, whether you are a practitioner who is looking to develop a business, whether you are someone who is looking to get out of pain and dysfunction, or maybe you're just trying to get more in touch with yourself. I think this is something that can be really useful. So having said that, it might get a little funky. So if you are paying attention, if you are listening, if you are watching, I would suggest that you be ready to move. Okay, that is kind of where this is how this is going to go. I would be ready to move. I'd be ready to have fun and really just come in with that open mindset, that open heart. Um, having said that, any thoughts on that, CJ? Are you feeling pretty good about it?
Thanks for inviting me on, man. I'm really excited. I've listened to the
Absolutely.
first couple episodes, and you brought tears to my eyes. So uh,
Oh,
maybe you'll make me cry today.
I did not expect that. That's awesome, man. Right on, right on. Appreciate the transparency there. Heck yeah. Um, so the main topic. Okay, let's no. You know what? The main tool that we're going to discuss today is the coil rope. Right. This is I have it across my neck. CJ's got it across his neck. Okay. The coil rope. Now, I guess before we get into it too far, I know a little bit about the history of how you came across the coil rope or in regard to slush ropes. And she was like, hey, could you use this for something? Do you mind just giving a quick background as to where the coil rope came from and how you decided to build it into practice?
Yeah, I met Slush Bea of Slush Ropes, the creator of Slush Ropes, back in 2019, 2020 ish. And I love the feel of her ropes. They were awesome to throw after I'd gone through the whole WEC method cert. I learned a lot about the coiling core and just some other principles of movement that I hadn't really articulated up to that point, but it felt. Um, so I kind of had a little bit of a background in some rope flow and just getting ropes in my hands. Nothing really prior to that, except for I like to hold stuff and move around with it and just interact with it, just as any human with a new tool hopefully would. Start to explore it a bit. So Flush and I developed a little bit of a relationship over social media. I'm just like, oh, I love your stuff. I want to get some of these in my facility. Not my facility, our facility at Gymnazo. But I wanted them here. And so I had purchased a handful of slush ropes and got them in the hands of our community, our members, our coaches, and there's just something special about them. And we had some back and forth on social media, loving each other's stuff and just giving each other some hype. And she started to tap into some of my weird creativity and way of looking at movement.
Right.
And so she had a lot of stuff just kind of laying out around her shop back when she was in Vegas. Now she's down in LA. And she had this rope that kind of looked like this, but it had a few extra little knots in it. And it was just some extra rope that she had laying around that she threw some knots in. I was like, I'm going to send this out to CJ. Can you do something with this? And I was like, send it my way.
Right.
And so I got it and I was like, oh, this is just cool. It feels like a miniature rope. I feel like I can get some of my like limit force elastic type stuff that we were doing with resistance bands with WEC method, but it didn't have as much of that quality of elasticity. It was more rigid.
Right.
And so I immediately felt a good connection there because of the amount of effort that I didn't have to use to feel some of these things, these landmarks of coiling core and connecting, the upper body to the lower body through the core and through the hip. And so I started to just kind of integrate what I had learned from Gray Institute and from WEC method with a rope in the hands. Now, planning with this, I was like, I don't really know what I'm going to do with this to share with people. It was more of just like, this feels good for me. And I shared some videos on it when it wasn't official or anything. It was just kind of like, oh, I have this rope laying around. And people started asking questions of like, oh, do I need to have that rope? I'm like, no, go grab a t-shirt, go grab a towel, go grab something that's laying around that's not super heavy, has some flimsiness to it, some give, and then just pull it taut so you can connect your right hand to your left hand and just have that connection. It's just kind of turning on your rhomboids. You pull some apart, it's pulling your shoulder blades together. I was like, wow, this is just a really great primer for some upright postural work, doing any kind of like more rigid positioning. So I just started playing with some pulls there and then started to integrate it into some Gray Institute three-dimensionality and then into some of our Gymnazo movements and patterns that we were developing. And I was like, wow, there's like there's an infinitude of things to explore with this rope. How do I want this in people's hands because of just the immediate connection to tension of that pulling, that external torsion, in a sense that a lot of people are stuck out of. They're kind of in kyphosis and rolled forward and more compressed in their front. So just having somebody hold this and pull it apart, they're like, wow, I've connected to my back of my body, my posterior chain a bit more. And we started doing some different hinges and reaches with it. We're doing some spherical reaches. And I'm like, okay, I'm using this with more people unintentionally. I was like, I want to bring this in, but I just started having one at the facility and at Gymnazo, and people would pick it up and pull it around. And then I was like, hey, I'm gonna create some kind of educational course with this, just so it gives somebody a framework in which to explore and to make up their own stuff with. Like I don't own the coil rope. It's just go grab a piece of rope and tie knots in it.
Right.
But if you want something special that feels really good and has kind of this good message behind it, go to slush ropes. And slush ropes didn't have these on our site or anything. We were talking about a strategy of how we would launch this. And long story short, I created a little mini series with the coil rope that integrated a lot of these tensions and positions and just ways to provide some movement variety into the mix of what you're doing. And just having that variety itself can be powerful for somebody to connect differently with their body, with their mind, and with the space around them, going like, wow, I have a lot of power in my hands. I pull my hands apart and I feel my back muscles, my shoulder muscles. And when I finish doing this little mini circuit of stuff for a few minutes, my body feels warm. I'm a little bit not breathless, but my breathing rate's increasing, and I feel kind of like ready and charged up.
Right.
And so with the course, it just kind of broke down some of these components that it's not super scientific by any means. It's just, here's an explorational course to kind of dive into some of the things that we do at Gymnazo without all the biomechanics and all the programming. Just go take your body through these.
Right.
And with that, Slush is basically like, hey, here, let's launch this through Gymnazo officially. So it's not on her site, but just through Gymnazo. Do the whole course with it and rope. But that's kind of the story of how it came to be. It was kind of nothing. Sat in my garage for about a year, and I was using it here and there. And then I just started gravitating more towards it. And I started to feel more benefit from it. So
yeah, right on. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's one of the things that I'm going to use the word fascinates me about it. It's just that, like, it looks so simple, right? Like, it looks so simple. Like you said, it kind of laid around in the garage for a length of time where you were just kind of like, there it is. And you started making your way toward it, or maybe it was drawing you in, right? Or maybe you're just making, seeing it in a different lens as you were exploring your body. But that's one thing that does occur to me. Do you feel that the coil rope, so once you had it in your hands, it was more of like, I'm thinking in terms of our capacity, a human's capacity to grab different tools and different things will occur to them to do. Do you feel that you grab the coil rope and you are immediately kind of like, it occurs to me to move a little bit differently here? Or were you already inside of some of these movements and you wanted to bring the coil rope into that?
That's a great question. I think my initial exploration came from stuff that I had learned and felt through doing WEC method, and learned and felt through doing the mace with Leo Savage. And it was a lot of this tying both sides together, this both sides utilized effect that I started to explore more of. But what I initially went through was just, what did I learn with the mace? Okay, can I do that with the coil rope? And it's different because the mace stays sturdy and straight.
Right.
The rope, you have to apply tension a little bit to keep it pulled taut. So it's kind of like applying the anti-rotation stuff that Leo Savage talks about, which is like crushing or ripping the mace.
Gotcha.
And so this is just ripping. This is just that pull apart, more of the external torsion. You could do internal torsion stuff with it, but it lends itself to more of this opening of your front side initially. Because who doesn't just grab something and kind of pull it apart? Like, oh yeah, pull it taut. Like that's just a natural thing to do. So I think that's where I started. And I was just kind of going through the reaches high and low and trying to play with different intensities of tension. I was like, okay, when I go like full bore, I can make it like 30 to 40 seconds before I'm tapped out of like max tension. What happens if I put as little tension as possible? So infinitesimally small, like meaning, okay, it's taut. And now it's actually pulled taut right here. If you see the rope, and I'm pulling like at 5%. Like, what if I pull at 1%? Okay, I'm pulling at 1%. Wow, I still feel a minor connection to that back side, but I could put much less effort into the tension and more effort into the movement. So it started to make sense of like this isotonic, isometric approach. And then I explored multiple dimensions. I couldn't even tell you what angulations and stuff I went through. It was just kind of like, I see this infinite bubble around me. Can I take it through every spot of the bubble? So I tried to like trace the front of the bubble and the top of the bubble and the sides of the bubble and then rotational. And I tried to go angulations through that. And I was kind of like painting this awareness of tension in different positions.
Right.
And I go into like a lower body stretch and I'd be like, wow, my lower body feels good. And then I add the coil rope in with a little bit of upper body tension and it amplified what my lower body could feel. And I was like, whoa, okay. So I'm tapping this bigger continuum of these fascial lines, these networks or meridians that you want to talk about. It kind of electrified my brain in the sense of like, I am so like ready to go just do anything right now. After playing with it for, 20 or 30 minutes, going, okay, is this just me? Am I tripping myself out about
Right,
this
right,
stuff? Or is this
right,
something that I could articulate to somebody else and they could feel the power that sits within them? Like you really start to
right.
tap into, wait, what is my right and left side? Okay, I know I have a right and left hand, but when you're playing with tension, it's like it's a full spectrum of body. And maybe it's more upper, maybe it's more lower, but because the coil rope lends itself to your hands and holding it, there's a whole level of upper body connection that I hadn't tapped into before. And so it was eliciting like it was waking up like old injuries that I had in the past that hadn't really been
Oh,
bothered.
okay,
But
okay.
going like, whoa, I haven't found this connection of my shoulder blade to my rib cage yet with this tissue. Like that, my
Right.
body's starting to shake. I'm like, okay, well, central nervous system is firing off here, going, hey, this is something new. I'm gonna hang out here. I'm gonna put a lot of effort. I'm gonna put a little effort. I'm gonna try and with my mindset, it was like I want to find the spectrum of my ability within that tension.
Right.
What can I do with max? What can I do with a little bit? And just that conversation, it was like I don't know how to organize this. I'm just kind of
Right.
intuitively
Right.
moving through stuff that the tension is now providing me information to go into new positions to learn more about my body
Right.
and to try to put that into an organized framework. I'm like, there's no point to this. We need to just organize a way to explore this so that when you feel things, like just acknowledge it. That's
Yeah.
the point of this tool is to acknowledge what you feel and bring you to more presence.
Just expanding on the feeling aspect of it. So one thing that a couple points came up while you were speaking, and I'm thinking of the people that I've given the coil rope to, or when I'm working virtually with someone. Oftentimes, as like a prerequisite, I always say, please have a hand towel ready to go. Like, or if they have like a dowel rod or something that we can create the connection between left and right. Now, just I would, if you can try and explain or at least detail, it doesn't have to be in great detail, but if someone has something in their hands like that, whether it's the coil rope, whether it's a hand towel, whether it's a dowel rod, or you brought up the mace earlier, what how I'll say what is something that maybe they are experiencing that you could kind of describe to them that is like being able to relate to, okay, maybe I'm pulling a little bit too hard, or maybe I have just enough tension, or I don't really know what my rhomboids are. Like, what could I be feeling? Shoulder blade on the rib cage, things like that. So, like, just like a quick and simple kind of, hey, I got home from work. I feel locked up. I'm tired, but I'm gonna grab this hand towel and I'm gonna go do it. What's something I could look for straight off the bat?
I mean, first it's just kind of a quick check in with the back side of the body. I say rhomboids, but not everybody knows what those rhomboids are, where the
Right,
heck they are. But
right,
when you pull this apart, your rhomboids are going to probably turn on. So
right,
it's not something I would necessarily share with them unless they want to talk about anatomy and the muscles and stuff. But more so of
right,
like, I want to bring awareness to. I'll put my hands on their back before they pull the rope, and I say,
right,
I grab their shoulder blades, and I want you to feel this connection between your shoulder blades. So I'll put hands on sensory feedback because they don't have anything touching them when they're pulling the rope. They're just
right,
creating tension. So if I can kind of prime that area of sensory, give their brain a little bit of feedback saying, here's the area that we're going to kind of focus in on. I like that, just that central pull apart and saying, I want to make sure this person's not working harder than they need to, because right
right,
now we just need to connect. So I have them go wide base, separate their feet outside shoulder width. So I have a good sturdy stability, maybe turn the toes out a little bit. So it gives them even a stronger anchor to the ground. And I just have them soften their knees. And I have them bring their butt back, chest forward a little bit, and bring the knot, that reference point in the middle or the middle of the towel, whatever it is, right to their heart, right to the center of their chest. And as soon as they're there, as soon as they pull back in, generally I'll see their body kind of roll forward if they're not really familiar with the backside of their body. So what I'm going to have them do is hold that light tension and try to pull their shoulder blades back. And I'll actually put my hand between their shoulder blades and say, try to squeeze my hand, right? Put it right between their shoulder blades
right,
and try to squeeze. Now, a lot of people are dominant, like they may have a ton of shoulder blade movement so that they pull their shoulder blades so tight together that there's like they're contracted, but there's no room to play with like isotonic
okay, okay,
movement. So when they go to pull, this rope is wide enough that your shoulder blades, if you kept going wider, they get closer and closer together. If it's too narrow, you might kind of just focus on too much in
okay,
the midline. But because it's a
right,
little bit wider than shoulder width for most people, it allows them a bit more of this ability to kind of extend their heart and their chest and kind of
right,
roll back. And I literally just have them sit there for 30 seconds. And I see if they're working too hard, I'll say, hey, let's decrease the effort a little bit, but keep that tension. And I'll go put my hands and feel if their rhomboids are contracting in between their shoulder blades. Are they getting hard, essentially? Right? They pump it up. And when I'm there, I'm just kind of sitting there watching. And after about 30 seconds, just that isometric hold at like a 10%, 20% effort, it starts to get quite taxing because nobody's really holding themselves like that. If they are, they're probably trying to force themselves out of a postural position. That's just giving them another poor position because they're using just their shoulders. With the coil rope, that squeeze, you can then kind of steer the elbows down or out a little bit, and that can help them connect down into their lat. So if you get that pull, and just like a little bit of effort, little knee bend, little chest, lean forward a little bit, eyes are forward. And then while you're here, just kind of let your elbows lift up a little and then try to bring them all the way down to your sides. And as they come down, the lat muscles start to engage quite a bit more. So I kind of take them out of position on purpose so that they can feel their body creating more tension and then releasing some of it. And then creating, so they kind of do like a light pull. And then as they roll their elbows in, a heavier pull. And then, okay, we do that one perfect. There's set one. Okay, set two, I'm going to have you go for 10 seconds at 30%. So a little bit more intensity. If they're already shaking, they're working too hard.
Yeah.
Right. Unless it's just a new firing of that muscle and it's something brand new to them. Yeah. It might not take much, but for most scenarios, they're not going to crank it too hard. But then as they're in 30%, I might have them continue to hold and say, hey, let's amplify it to 40%. A couple seconds later, okay, bring it to 50. And then I say, I want you to pull as hard as possible, but don't lose your position. Because now their position's going to get stronger. The base is going to get stronger because if they try to pull really hard, a lot of times we get uprooted, our legs straighten out, and we roll forward and we're just forcing it. It's like, I don't want you to force it. I want you to turn the dial up a little bit and be able to turn the dial down so you can start to control your body's tension consciously. Your body's going to hold tension subconsciously, unconsciously. But as soon as you start to bring this conscious intent of let's pull the rope apart, let's amplify that pull, now they start to recognize how much of a conversation they've been missing with their body, right? So this could be something that's just like, wow, I feel connected back there. And that would be all we do. I just want to use it for a primer. Now, somebody who's like, they're really feeling it and they're getting after it, I might start to take them through a high and low reach. So an isotonic, meaning let's keep the tension the same intensity, but let's go ahead and move the tissue through that intensity. And I'll see typically like from that position, let's go ahead and stand up tall and then just pull it like 5%, take the arms up overhead, full reach. And at the very highest point, then get up to 10 to 20%. And now we start to engage the tension while the shoulder blades are now elevating, right? The shoulder's going through flexion. So we're teaching the body how to have a good connection of tension consciously in other positions. Because they could just go for a up and down reach, but their nervous system isn't necessarily getting much information besides the motion going up and down. But as soon as you go into a position and then amplify the tension, the body's going to receive a lot more data of what position we're actually in and how we're producing tension. Is it coming from underneath the shoulder blades, or above the shoulder blades? Is it coming from the core? Is it coming from the low back? What's now losing connection here where I can help restore that body, your body's communication to your brain and your brain's communication to your body. Let's build a bridge there. And this cool thing is it's a tether that puts it all together, right? You got a right hand, left hand, something in the middle that can reference. Now we can start to steer our body as one full body versus individual parts. Even though the hands are moving, can we feel how the chain reaction kind of works its way down the chain or up the chain, depending on where we're reaching?
Okay. So that's, yes. Okay.
That's why I would start just chest and then going vertical and dropping down, kind of a vertical line.
Absolutely. And I think that's great. And then, I mean, just the awareness of, like several times you said, the conversation with the body. I think that's fantastic. That definitely helps someone who maybe has never been taught, isn't taking the time, doesn't know how to just start the little things, right? Most people are like, what do you mean you're talking to your body or you're having a conversation? Like, I get it, but once you start kind of putting yourself in an environment to do that, you'd be surprised by what comes back, right? So, but one thing that, and this is kind of, this is really, you used the word several times during the description there of what someone could be feeling, and you kept saying priming, right? Prime this area, I could just be priming for this. And I think like when I go through this, so real quick, I'll just give you my experience with this. I've been using the coil rope, I think 2 years now. I think 2 years. That's kind of, I can't remember. I think 2 years. And
forever.
Right. It feels like forever. And the more that I've used it, the more I feel like I unlock myself. And we'll get to that in a little bit. I'm not going to go too deep into that right now. But I grew up with my dad. My dad renovated houses as a side project. You know, he was working a full-time job, and then he started a business with a neighbor where they started renovating houses. And I always had to put the priming coat, right? Your primer, your Kills primer, and that before you did the other coats of paint, right? And so when I start doing this, I don't know why, but my initially my experience was like, man, this reminds me of putting on that coat so that I can go do something, so that I can put on the next layer. And so I don't know if that's how you would relate to this, but if you can, what can we just talk about what priming actually means to you, what priming could mean to a client, a practitioner? How do we see this thing called priming that we use in our everyday conversation now?
Priming, I mean, I'm going to go bro sciencey here because I use it as a term loosely. Right. I don't know exactly what's going on in there, but I know that it works. So if it can work across multiple populations and different kinds of people, there's something here that I don't know how to explain, but it works. And it makes sense, at least in my mind, because it is like the
characteristics, there's characteristics of it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're basically just generating heat.
Right. Okay.
Internally. So that's if we can generate heat. It's like if you were to go do a bunch of yard work right from waking up.
Right.
The body's gonna be moving slow. Stuff's gonna be talking to you. You're holding an edger, and you're just like, oh, a weed eater or something. You're just like, man, fucking shoulder. Right. Leg. Damn, got a long day of work to do. Then the difference of that is, say you've been up for a little bit, and your body's been walking around. You maybe had some coffee or something that just gets your body stimulated and ready to go. Could be some movement or some light stretching. Those are all primers in a sense. Right. It's getting your body awake and ready. And so I like to think that the characteristics of this are, because we're consciously engaging with a tool and our body, we're getting a bunch of feedback up into our brain, and our brain is using fuel to process what we're feeling and thinking about. And then our muscles are also warming up. There's blood circulating through there already. But then as soon as we start to contract a muscle and then essentially load it and then contract it, essentially load it, even hold for a bit, we're waking up more of the muscle fibers. So we're getting more muscle recruitment for whatever we're going to do next, versus whatever muscles are kind of turned on and stimulated and ready. And the big ones are going to fire first. They're going to fire first until the other ones start to wake up potentially. Or maybe you don't even use the other tissues, that little smaller guys or smaller fibers of a glute, a hamstring, a lat, a shoulder. You're waking up more of the full bit of tissue and connecting it to more muscles. So we know that the muscles aren't individuals like they are in the anatomy textbook. They're all connected with fascia and all these different fibers, that it's like one continuous stream. Right. So with the coil rope, because both sides are connected, you're going to have both sides of the tissue and across multiple layers, not just the outer layers, deeper layers, but everything's starting to fire up. Right. And so you got neurotransmitter going to tissue, you're waking it up. Now, proprioceptively, you're getting feedback from your body because you went to pull, but then you kind of get a little off balance. You're like, whoa. So you're priming your mind and your body for activity. Right. Just like, and I would say just like the coat of paint. That's a good analogy. And I've used it before. Is like, let's put on this first coat so that the next layer sticks better and it holds longer. Okay. So if we train with priming, it doesn't need to be super long. It could just be 3 to 5 minutes. Right. But if those 3 to 5 minutes, you kind of amplify some intensity, turn on some muscles, and it's not even loaded. It's just you are creating tension. Right. Now you've got that first coat or that first wake up, like a warm up, that first bit that now says, okay, whatever we're going to do next, I'm more ready for. I'm probably going to be more successful with it because I have more communication happening through my body. Versus I get to the first set, and then usually my second set's way better than my first. I'm warmed up for that motion. Okay, well, what if you did coil rope and then went to your first set and you maximize those 3, 4, 5 sets of whatever you're doing, but your first set started out strong, versus I need that first set because I don't want to hurt myself. It's like, well, if you're primed, if you got some good tension to the tissue, go stack on some heavy weight. Like, you should be able to do this cold in a sense. Like, you need some kind of primer wake up. It could just be some smelling salt. Let's go, right? It work. It's just a different kind of primer for the brain, and you're getting the cortisol levels to spike. Well, this is starting to bring stress into the body to prepare for action.
Right. So, okay. So you said in terms of length of time. So let's say just for kind of food for thought, but or really insight. Someone comes home from work, they're feeling stuck, they decide to grab the hand towel, the coil rope. Someone comes in to work out with you, and you give them the coil rope. Someone is at home getting ready for their own day of exercise, maybe it's a hike, whatever. Does the duration then shift in your mind? Do you feel that depending on the environment, the experience, more time working with the tool or working to prime the tissue is gives you a more favorable outcome? The more time you dedicate to it, do you feel like there's better, or can you wear yourself out in the process? Can you kind of perpetuate, let's say, unfavorable patterns if you're not really listening? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's potential for that, and it's gonna be different across the board.
Right.
I feel like there's not necessarily this is what you need to do and this is how it works. But what I've found works for most people is spending 5 to 10 minutes with the rope,
Right.
going through some form of spherical reach, like just building that tension initially, then doing a spherical reach so that we're getting the shoulders and the spine to go through the three dimensionality, getting those movement nutrients of that action that these bones and these joints can do. We're priming the mind to handle that subconsciously, so we can kind of fine tune some little pieces and get some little kinks out. It might be like the first or second reach, you're like, oh man, my shoulders feel really stiff. But then as we're priming it, you're like, wow, actually by the 8th and 10th rep, I feel like groovy. Oh, maybe that's all we need. Just do it until it feels groovy. And maybe you're so locked up that it might not happen in one session or in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but there's something that does happen, which is a connection. Now, if we just do that once and then we never touch it again, we're probably going to lose that connection. But if we establish some kind of consistency, maybe it's a morning routine, maybe it's when my body gives me the signal and I'm feeling stiff, I go grab the rope. What it does is starts to facilitate a better path out of this discomfort we're experiencing. And now we get to intentionally create discomfort. It's not comfortable using the rope when you apply a lot of tension, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it's effort. So it's uncomfortable. And for people that don't like effort, it's extremely uncomfortable. And they might even say it's painful, but these terms are loosely used because they're very individualized. So somebody can say, man, this really hurts. And they're in extreme pain in the joint. Or somebody can say this hurts, but their muscles are just extreme, they're screaming, right? They're working too hard. So it's definitely a spectrum of effort. Using the rope by itself and just going through the motions, you're not going to hurt yourself. It's not going to create poor patterns. In fact, it'll probably bring more movement variability and options to your realm of like, I haven't done that before. That was just it was almost like a pattern disruptor, meaning you've been stuck in your way of moving and doing stuff. You grab this other tool, it facilitates an opening out of the path that may have been taking you into wear and tear, dysfunction, poor mood, low energy, whatever else. Just disrupting the pattern. That might be what makes this thing so powerful. It's just new for people to try out. But what I found honestly is, we warm up every single day in our group sessions with our whole team has the coil rope. So we have 18, 30 people out there. They've all got a coil rope and we're going through these reaches together, different swings, squats and stuff with the rope. And it just allows the upper body to get a consistent little bit of effort and prime while the lower body does some work. So we're constantly engaged with what we're doing. A lot of times if we don't have something in our hands, the lunges, the squats, the reaches all become lackadaisical and low effort and just like, I want to reach across the body. Okay. Like, is this really serving me? Maybe if I don't do this ever, but for most people, they'll probably reach across for something throughout their day. But if we have a rope, we start to rotationally press as we're creating tension, we're getting more stimulus down into the core muscles, the lats, everything around the torso. And so we get this bigger connection of, if we're going to be doing dynamic motions, dynamic lifts, some kind of multidimensional training, my body is proprioceptively more ready for this drill than without it.
Right. That makes sense.
So I mean, overall, anything, it just feels better to use beforehand, or even just to stretch with it. And the more I've used it and the more I've had to see other people use it, they actually prefer to use it rather than not use it because it helps them balance better. And you're like, wow, that's pretty wild. You're just holding something in your hands and you have better balance. Well, it's also because you have better tension communication along your entire fascial body and beyond.
Right. Yeah. And as you were speaking there, then it's almost like a form of accountability or integrity there, where it's because again, right, I'm speaking from my experience as well as what I've done with some of my clients, and I haven't given it to everyone. It's usually a select client there, but more so along the lines of like, I just want that. Yeah, there's something about it where they're able to immediately, and sometimes it's not an awareness around how much they're pulling. Sometimes it's not the awareness of, oh, what am I actually feeling? Sometimes it is more of balance. And ever since this is kind of going, just bringing another piece in here, the nail boards. When I first started the nail boards, and you were like, "Hey, why don't you grab the coil rope?" And I don't want to butcher your words, but I think you said circulate the pain, or circuitry of the pain, or something like that. And I didn't totally understand the concept of like of what that meant at the time, but I realized the more that I started bringing the coil rope into play when I use the nail boards, or when I'm doing some other movements, if there is, let's say, a pain stimulus or a discomfort stimulus, I feel as if I'm able to, like, I think of it like I pick it up and I kind of just like take it around the body, and I let everything kind of know, like, this is what we're feeling right now. There seems to be an abundance of tension in this one area. Let's see if we can just spread this out a little bit and get kind of like use it in a more efficient way. Now that's kind of going fairly deep there, just in terms of what someone could be feeling. But long story short, I'm just saying that it provides access to seemingly quite a few things there, whether it is the pain, the discomfort, the starting the conversation of the body, the turning the system on and heating itself up, priming yourself for whatever the activity may be. So absolutely, like it's I've got a lot from it. It seems like, I mean, if you're doing it with 18 to 30 people, I mean, do you find that there's any issue in I guess like making sure that they have the appropriate tension? You know, like, because I feel like I could start doing this, and like, this is what I'm doing, right? Like, or I could start doing it and I'm like trying to pull it up. So is it when you're going through the warm up, are you kind of saying cues as you go, just to kind of keep people like, hey, just remember.
Yeah, there's a couple points I want to touch on too. You were talking about unkinking your slink, unkink your slinky.
There you go. There you
go. The standing on the nail boards, and I mean, really, what you're doing is you're creating a closed chain from an open chain. So you're open chain, and then the hands are free, so tension could kind of get lost in the upper body. As soon as you close the chain, now you can steer that tension. So you've got this circuitry going through the feet that are grounded, and now your hands are actually grounded to a tool.
Right.
But that tool is not necessarily something that's going to pull you a ton off balance. Like, this thing, it weighs less than a pound, right?
Right.
Anybody can hold on to it. Even somebody's got I got people with bad arthritis and stuff, and they can't necessarily grip it firm, but they're like, it feels good when I do this. And they kind of pinch it with their thumbs, like they can still create some tension. So the overall intent is just to unkink yourself. And now how we do that is variable. And so when you have a huge group of people, yeah, there's going to be the cues that get lost, and they don't necessarily get the full optimization of the use of the tool for what it's designed for, but they are communicating with their body in space. And when you have a large group, like when I'm doing one-on-one, I'll hone in on not necessarily a ton of cueing, but I'll help them coordinate their motion in a way that's getting the right intent for what I'm helping them get to. Like, okay, they can't get a pull, they're getting a ton of neck. Okay, can I help steer their shoulders down a little bit to help them get to the sensation? Because once they find the sensation, they know what they're looking for. Right. If it's brand new, they don't know what they're looking for. So I just want to get them familiar with it in their hands.
Right.
So in a large group setting where we're just using it as a warm-up or primer tool, I'm more after, can we all move together, get through some of these movement nutrients, and just get our feet moving, our ankles moving, our hips moving, our spine moving, and our shoulder moving, and our hands connected. And I'll offer some cues of like, okay, guys, we're going to pull that rope a little bit harder apart. I want you to feel your body start to shake a little bit, and then let off the gas a little. And then when you get to your top, I want you to search for that. When you get to the base, I want you to search for it. Across the board, it looks like everybody's doing a little bit different intensity,
Of course,
or a little bit different position. But the general sense of what we're going after is we're moving through our sphere, and we're getting the joints to articulate movement in 3D space. Right. Now, if I see somebody that's like working way too hard, I'm like, hey guys, let's not work so hard. Or if somebody's like got the rope and it's kind of like limp, I'll just give a cue of like, hey guys, make sure that rope is straight.
Right.
Because if it's straight, that means there's tension there. And then if they're working too hard, I'm going to see their arms won't straighten. They'll like hunch, like, hey, let off a little bit. So I'll cue that as things arise, but I don't want to over cue initially, because everything just gets lost in translation. But
Makes
if I
sense.
see something happening, we can kind of bring attention to it right now of what's happening. And that's again what this tool is about, is to help us get back to what are we presently doing. And for some, it's going to be like, I'm immediately right here, right now. I feel my body. And then other people are like, why am I doing this? You know?
Right.
And it's like, okay, I get it. Like, don't use it if you don't want to use it. I'm not going to force anything upon you, but recognize there is something very powerful here when you're able to connect both of your hands through your mid body. And that might go through in somebody's ear and out the other because they're just like, I just came for a guided warm up and workout.
Right.
I'm not trying to learn about anything. Meanwhile, I know their body is learning a shit ton from just going through this.
Right.
And I have opportunities to now bring more value to this client. Maybe I show them something after a session. Like, hey, I noticed when you're doing the rope stuff, there's a lot of like limp stuff. Just that's not bad. That's not wrong. But if you want to get more out of it, apply a little bit of tension so that you feel your shoulders kind of getting tired. If your arms, if your upper body's getting a little tired, that's a great sign that we're
Right.
working through that tension. If your upper body's not feeling anything, you're probably not applying tension. So
Right.
let's get more out of this. I want to bring more value to your session so that in that hour, whatever it is, that 45 minutes, you're maximizing this opportunity and learning more about your body without necessarily having to dive into all the deep weeds of biomechanics and isometrics and isotonics and all this mumbo jumbo terminology. That stuff, that feeling exists without the terminology. You don't need the
Right.
terminology to
Right.
decipher it. It can help to alter the course or kind of change the intention, but overall, it's just, can you move with a tool that seems so silly and get out of your own fucking head
Right.
and just
Right.
feel your body?
Right.
Like, yeah, it does look silly, but when you do it and you feel it, especially in a one-on-one setting or very, very small group setting, like in our multiple moves restorative classes, we'll use the
Yeah.
coil ropes too. It's like where the power is understood because we can guide it slower, bring better cues into some of these pieces that's with a smaller squad or just a one person, what's best for them. And then
Right.
hopefully what happens is their body now has a way of articulating to their brain what they're searching for. So when they get there, like, oh, I feel this. Now, over time, what that's going to do is help to influence their body's ability to calibrate tension. So if you do have shoulder pain, neck pain, back pain, hopefully you've done this enough times that you know what when you feel good feels like. So that when you feel funky, you can recognize like, wow, there's a little kind of kink in here, a kind of grab. I'm going to do a little isometric hold in that position and just breathe through it and see
Right.
if it softens. Many times people get a little jam or jolt and they get out of position, they get freaked out by it. They
Right. Right.
brace.
Right. Right.
But when I see that happen with the coil rope and they're like maybe doing it like to the side, they're like, I don't want them to stop. I want them to soften,
Right.
readjust. And now they feel better. Now apply tension. They go, holy shit, that's different.
Right.
I just softened into it versus trying to force myself into it.
Okay. Right on. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And I mean, yeah, you said some things there that just really get me going in terms of like how I'm cueing, how I'm speaking to people, how I'm even speaking to other practitioners, and just kind of creating that closed circuit, keeping that whether or not they're aware of it, then you're keeping a dialogue going because there is the connection between the left and the right side, and whether or not they're aware of imbalance or whatever the case is, like you said, there's feedback happening regardless. And that's interesting now is like considering as this is my 12th year as a personal trainer, as the last few years kind of getting into this movement realm, like my warm-ups have never included anything to kind of keep that integrity, to keep that closed circuit, to warm up the body in this type of way. Usually it was hopping on the treadmill. Sometimes it was jump rope. Like, and they may serve a purpose in that moment, right? Depending on the context. But it's just interesting to think that you could actually go through something that you are creating an internal dialogue, whether or not you're aware of it, which I think that's very empowering. I think that helps people create a foundation without knowing they're creating a foundation, that helps someone become more grounded, stable, and start to really create that awareness around their space. Now there's two things I want to jump on. One, you started talking about a sphere of potential, moving in their sphere. The other thing is that we just kind of spoke more toward the client there. Let's say, so one of my aspirations here that I've told you is that I would really like to be able to bring this to community here in Florida, whether that's a workshop, whether that's starting to kind of go from facility to facility and just say, hey, I want to teach this little class. Would you allow me to, blah, blah. In speaking to the practitioner and speaking to the coaches and speaking to other health professionals, how do you go about starting to, so I did the workshop with you in California, and the whole time, man, I'm like, oh my, I'm supercharged. Like I'm like, and I was so sore from the prior day because of what we did all of Saturday and then that Friday night. I was so sore. And then as soon as we started going through the active tension holds and then starting to work through the strides, wides, and crossovers, I like, you just start to feel this like turn on of the system. And it's like, kind of, it feels like it's amping up, like it's ramping up, ready to go. How do you relay that to a practitioner, to, let's say you guys hire a new coach, so on and so forth? How do you kind of have that conversation of like, look, this is what's possible, but you have to start moving with it? Because if I talk to you about it, it's not going to click.
Yeah. I wish I had a very solid golden answer, but that's what I've honestly been working through lately, is developing a path forward so that if you do this sequence, you're like, you recognize the change that happened. Where were you before the sequence?
Right.
Okay, 5 minutes later, where are you now?
Right.
And can you evaluate that? And I think the hardest part for the connection here, especially to our own body, is that we don't know we don't know. Right. And when something new, like a new sensation arises, we're looking for something that we can connect it to, to explain why and understand it all. But I think our body is way smarter than our brain can ever truly be, because our brain processes things very slowly, consciously, but subconsciously things are happening like very quickly, at light speed, essentially.
Right.
I think the thing I want to reiterate about it, is that we want to set the body up for more integrity in movement, and have something that helps to calibrate our body where it recognizes a poor position, a poor tension, or a solid tension, a good tension, something that's going to make us successful in a lift. We can be in a poor position with great tension and not hurt ourselves. You do a deadlift with a rounded back, or let's say a Jefferson curl or something, and like somebody looks at us like, oh my gosh, don't do that. It's like, hold on, this person probably has great tension, because look what they're able to do. They're not hurting themselves. Not that everybody needs to do that thing, but the concept, the principle of connect with your body and the tension that it's able to produce, that's everything that we do. If we have poor tension when we reach for a milk jug in the fridge and we go to pick it out of there and we go, oh, my shoulders clicked. Our body should have connected that tension to allow that 3-pound weight to be transferred from the fridge to the counter, or just to carry it.
That's not something, you're not actively thinking about, oh, I should
engage
have
your shoulder.
tension. Right. Yeah. Like, exactly. So, okay. I get, so you're speaking to creating, from my standpoint, you're speaking to creating a foundation that allows someone to do the things that they need to do on a daily basis without having to, okay, I need this amount of tension, I need it to last this long, and I need it to be this long, or whatever, whatever. I need it to be this deep. So, okay, continue. I'm just kind of putting it together. Okay, go ahead.
Like, so this taps into a little bit more of not just the proprioceptive network, but essentially, I mean, it's this whole system that's working behind the scenes that we're not consciously engaging with, like our blinking, our breathing, these autonomic things that happen. They should all also happen when we move. When we take a step, our body should be able to react. If we miss a step or we start to trip, can we catch ourselves from it? If we don't have a practice that engages our mind with our body in tension, like literally tension, physical tension, how do we expect it to do those things when we're not even thinking about movement at all and we go to move? Over time, our body's going to develop these attractor wells and pathways of potentially poor tension and poor articulation of full body mechanics. Okay. Not that we know every single position of the body, but we need to be able to produce tension in different positions. When we go to do something that might be a bit new, it can be a bit scary, especially with moving an object that's awkward, a mattress, a bed frame, a potted plant, whatever you've got that's funky and not like shaped like a dumbbell or a barbell. If we go and don't have this ability to create asymmetric tension to create a successful motion pattern, we will probably be okay for a while until we're not. Until it's the last straw on the camel's back and how my body's articulated this path of motion, it finally was too much wear and tear on the lumbar spine. It was too much pressure on the hip. It was too much pressure on the knee. If we have a practice that at least allows us to spherically engage, meaning the front of our body, the back of our body, the sides of our body, the insides of our body, they're all connected. But if we don't have the ability to create conscious tension and work through stuff, when we go to do something subconsciously and just react, do we have a pathway formed that allows us to pick a good movement option that's successful with tension, and our body just quickly establishes that because of what we feel? We go to lift the milk jug, we feel the tension rise, and we go, oh, I'm holding it through my whole core. Right. Versus it's my shoulder, and now my shoulder feels stressed out from doing that. Now I'm out for 2 weeks of lifting because my shoulder hurts. What if we just reestablish this tensional network that the body can help to organize through sensory feedback, letting you know what you feel? We gave our body an intent, our body gave feedback of what we experienced, and we say, okay, does this feel like it's more working across my body, or is this working like in one joint that's pissing it off? We can now reestablish that communication, that dialogue with that tissue, so that tissue in the shoulder now knows it has friends up around the neck, down around the core, even down into the hip and down into the foot. And how I put pressure to my foot might influence how I lift that milk jug out of there. Right. We don't think about all those things, and we shouldn't have to. So if we can create a system or some kind of series of movement for somebody that helps them at least calibrate some form of tension that they might have not communicated to themselves intentionally on their own, but we guided them through it, or even guided ourselves through it. And it may not be a perfect, like I go up and down and left and right and rotationally. Maybe I just work through 2 patterns. And as I did that pattern more often or more consistently, now all of a sudden I feel a smoother path, more fluid, less rigidity, less off balance. Our body is processing a lot of information every second. Right. So if we can slow that down by holding a position and just letting our body know it's safe, it's grounded, we have the ability to move from this position. Wow, and this tension. And wow, we have the ability to express from this position and tension. Like when you start really ripping that thing, your face starts to light up, your face muscles start to turn on. There's this deeper connection that I couldn't even begin to articulate of your body is now establishing more integrity across the entire unit, from your feet, from your toes to your nose. Everything is getting reestablished. And it's happening at a very subconscious level, though we can consciously engage and feel. Our body is learning what it feels like to be there, and what it feels like to hold there, and what it feels like to move through there. And proprioceptively, we know that to engage proprioceptors, it's not just one speed. It's not just one direction. It's not one tension. There's compression, there's rotation. Your proprioceptors are responding to different forces and pressures that we're putting upon the body. And so if we can slow it down and put ourselves in a safe environment to really feel some of these things out, it may not be directly related to the actual task we're going to do in real life, but our body now has a better baseline of tension so that it can foster more success into whatever we're doing in daily life. So through a constant practice of it, your body's probably going to give you more feedback and more sense to where you're like, before I lift this potted plant, I need to adjust my position for a second. Oh, there's my tension. There's my hips. Boom. Okay. Oh, that looked awkward, but it felt okay. I didn't hurt my back. Right. Like that's, excuse me. That bridge to build is through personal practice. Right. And it's not always the perfect practice, except for one that's consistent. And then one that also explores beyond the paths that you often train. So you got to bring in some kind of variety. It may not be every day, but maybe you try a different lift or a different reach or something new. And I think what's missing too in the bridge there is that most people don't know how to explore that space. They've learned techniques, yes, maybe some strategies, but not necessarily directly related to the principles of our body moving through space. Right. It's like so much about technique and this is how it's done. And here's the perfect form. Okay, well, where did that come from? That technique that came from a strategy for somebody or even that person that came from a principle of understanding. We may not understand the principle. We just started to use a new strategy and then we developed a technique and this technique worked. And now, boom, that's kind of what I did with the coil rope is I created a bunch of techniques that kind of start with it, but know that it comes from a place of you don't have to do it exactly like this. Where I think a lot of other methodologies or techniques are like, this is how you need to do it. And there's respect there because sometimes doing it the exact way that it's shown is going to provide you a new path that you would have never articulated to your body.
Right.
So it's kind of like you gotta play in the gray area of not right and wrong, but what is currently happening and what could you articulate? Because the more you do it, the more you're going to realize there's a lot more going on that we can't explain, that nobody can explain.
Right.
Our body is doing it. It's found success with it. How it did it, we can speculate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and like just touching on some of those points in regard to, let's say, right, you've created, if you're going through the Coil Rope course, or if you're going through the Spherical Reach course, you're the Spherical Matrix course, you've created a set of techniques, let's say, right? And what occurred to me to do was I followed it blindly to start off, right? I followed it blindly from the standpoint of I want to just touch on something you said. You may have never done this before. It may have never occurred to you to move like this before. If you're and I was very much in a very traditional mindset, which nothing wrong with that. But then I started to incorporate more of a bubble, more of a sphere of movement. And I realized that just simple things of creating tension in the sagittal plane from high to low, I wasn't normally transitioning through that motion with tension like that. And then adding in my rib cage, going frontal plane. And so all I was speaking to there is like, it was very interesting to follow it blindly, starting to recognize I had never done a lot of these things before. And then after, I mean, like I said, I think it's been 2 years now. Now I'm just now, and this is me. Other people may move more quickly than I do. I'm just now unlocking, I spoke about it earlier this week, what feels like a deeper creative self, and that like, I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm not bound, right? Like I'm not bound to the fact that like, I have to move this way, right? Like this is the way a deadlift looks, do it that way. No, fuck that. I'm good. Like right now, what's occurring to me to do, it looks nothing like what I've been taught. So yes. So stepping outside of maybe just, yes, stepping outside of what you may know, right? And starting to incorporate things in the unknown. And like you said, the body, and this again, catching on over the last couple of years, the body is way smarter than this thing is. And the more that I try and intellectualize and experience, I realize the more I'm stepping outside of the experience that my body is trying to have. So sometimes I just kind of like shut the mind down and establish, this is how I want to move. Go do the move. Reflect later. And just go do it and reflect later. And granted, having context, having intention, these things need to be there. But one thing that was occurring to me as we're going through CJ, and I do want to touch on it because I'm going to speak from the standpoint of like 2/3 of my career in the fitness industry as a personal trainer, I was an idiot. And when I say that, I mean, I just didn't know anything, right? Like I had years of schooling in exercise science. I have my NASM certification in corrective exercise, like you name it. I had certifications, but I didn't know anything about what I know and have covered in the last 2 to 3 years with Gray Institute, with Gymnazo, with you, with Michael, and now dabbling into like WEC method and landmine and like seeing how other people are using these things. To the people that may still be where I was, or are looking for something else, looking for something more. They know there's more there. They see it everywhere on social media now. They're like, who's this CJ doing? Why is he moving like this? Do you feel that the coil rope, or we can even start to transition into the spherical reach here, but do you feel that that is a great addition or a complement to, or a great starting point for someone to work with, to work through, regardless of their education? Like if I come to you and I have no biomechanical education, I don't know what proprioception is. And even sometimes when you start talking about tension, I'm like, isn't tension a bad thing? Like most of the times, like we think of tension and we correlate it to like, there's too much tension in the body, or like, why don't you breathe and release some tension? But you're saying that we should be looking to create symmetric and asymmetric tension and have an integrity of tension. So it's like, do you feel that this is still applicable to someone who just got their NASM certification? someone who just got out of kinesiology school, like, do you feel that there's still something there for them where the coil rope can go right into their practice, whether it's for themselves or for their clientele?
I mean, it's certainly built for anybody to pick up and do. You don't have to have any prerequisites for it. I think that the disconnect right now is like there's fitness and there's movement, but those should be also one and in the same.
Right.
But fitness is looked at as in terms of the lifting and the progressive overload and the performance.
Right.
And then the movement is like restorative fluidity. I don't really know how it's all viewed globally, but
right.
movement seems to be picking up the concept of movement training seems to be growing in a lot of people's minds that have been in fitness for a while and they're burnt out and beat up from it.
Right.
There's people that have been in the movement game for their entire life and haven't really even gone into fitness because it's a whole camp they don't want to even visit, which I totally understand. Right. People are retiring from fitness and going into movement. And it's like, these are just two sides of the same coin, but not even two different sides. They're the same thing. It's just our lens is so restricted on based on what we were taught. So I don't want to badmouth NASM, ACSM and stuff like that. I think those are all great kind of starting points for somebody to just kind of get their feet wet and start training. And it's where a lot of training facilities require you to have at least this training cert to be a personal trainer so that you can now run sessions. So I think that's still an important piece. And I think, unfortunately, there's not enough movement knowledge going into those things. It's going into going fitness and this stuff. And then when we go and work with clients, it's like people have a lot of movement dysfunctions. I can't work with you. You're in pain, you need to go see a doctor. I can't work with you. I'm not even allowed to work with you. There's gray area here because it's individually based on the trainer and what they know and what they feel confident sharing. But there's also toes you don't want to step on for people who are licensed practitioners and they spend a lot of money and time learning about a lot of dysfunctions and diseases and physical limitations and issues. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, things like that, physios. That it's like we should all be sharing best practices of what comes up because we're all kind of in the front lines. It's kind of depending on the person and where they want to go first. Maybe they want to go to the authority figure when they're in discomfort and want to go to the doctor. That's where they're told to go. And that's what they learn to go. The doctor's not educated in movement per se. They're educated in medicine. And so they're going to bias in a medicine standpoint or the framework of you need to go to a PT to get an X-ray MRI and go through all this tape when it could be something that you go to a practitioner, a personal trainer, but they're very well versed in movement and can understand when you're moving a certain way that it's not wrong. That's your body's right way of moving, but it's inefficient and ineffective for your growth. You're just doing the stuff that's not best for you. It's actually harming you and it's preventing you from being consistent. So I think that, this coil rope, you can learn biomechanics through it. You can learn programming through it. You can learn movement through it because it's a very intuitive tool that like, okay, just hand somebody a rope. What are they going to do with it? They're either going to look at it and be like, what do I do with this? And have no tapping into intuition or think that they need permission to move a certain way. Right. Versus like, you're probably going to see them grab it and do like a thing here or a thing here, or like they'll copy you or they'll kind of swing it around. And it kind of gives you a lot of insight into just
where someone is.
What's this person's bias? But then if you can understand the sensations that we're trying to elicit with this movement or these positions with the rope, now you can help to build a bridge of conversation to somebody's body. So if they don't have the ability to feel something, it's not that they're doing it wrong. It might just be the lack of coordination and connection. So we can simplify stuff to just confirm that, hey, doing this, okay, can we feel that mid back muscles working? Great, fantastic. All right. When you go up, can we get a good pull? Can you feel the underside working? Can you feel the shoulders and the rib cage working? Can you take it to your right side and keep your hips square? Don't let your hips turn and now pull apart there. Can you feel your lat and oblique? Can you take it to the other side? And what that's going to show you is hopefully you're not telling people they're doing anything wrong. You're not trying to correct. This is not a corrective exercise by any means. Right. You're trying to get a good gauge of how this person is talking to their body. And if you as a coach or a trainer have poor communication with your body, this is not going to make any fucking sense.
Right.
And so like, this is a worthless tool. Give me the pump. Like, I get that. Yeah. Let's go get a dumbbell in your hands. Let's fuck the coil rope. We'll work that later. Let's go give you your pump. Like, that's what you want. That's what we're going to go do. But I'm going to try to integrate some pieces that give me more awareness so that when I'm coaching somebody, anybody's coaching somebody, hopefully they get a good gauge of where they're at today. Some days might be stronger, some days a little bit weaker, energy's off. There's ways to bring this in to help somebody become more present so that they can heal their body or their body can heal itself. If they're living in the future or the past of stuff, by paying this, I can't do this, I can't do that, or I'll never be able to do this. What they're doing is removing themselves from this present moment and what they're able to create and going, I can't, or I haven't, or I won't, or all these uh, um, excuses for not being right here, right now. Like, we're not trying to figure anything out. I just want you to connect with your body for a moment so that I can get a better gauge of what you're feeling or not feeling. And we're just building a dialogue so that, again, the coach who sees and the client who feels can now build a bridge of, you see something and they feel something that you don't see. Okay, that's going to give you more information of working with this person.
Right.
What that allows itself into is motions with the coil rope. You can assess the biomechanics of those motions and positions along with any other tool or just your body. But whether or not you know biomechanics or not, there is something mechanically happening within the joints and the tissues of the body. So if we can fine tune our lens now to kind of calibrate to what rope position and what are we trying to create, if you haven't taken yourself through those positions and tensions, it's really tough to build a bridge. And it really feels like this tool is worthless. But as you develop a personal practice of connection here and there doing it, maybe you find 3 drills that you really like with it, and that's the ones that you start with. You can start to assess a person's ability and availability and capacity for movement through a rope. And you don't have to put a dumbbell in their hands or some kind of weight that might freak them out. And now it's going to make them brace. And they're like, I don't want to do this. I just told them I didn't want to lift. But if you build the bridge with some kind of tension work, maybe it's a rope, maybe it's just using a wall or a mob stick or something light.
Right.
They start to feel their body and they start to feel their body differently. Now their body starts to go, I feel empowered. I feel activated. I feel engaged. I want to know more because you just created an experience for me that I haven't been able to create for myself or with any other coach. They just pushed me into a program and I'm just not getting anything of value out of this that's helping me grow in my awareness or my function or my fitness or whatever. But fitness, it's just this ability to do. It's not to do anything. It's just to do something.
Right.
And then, so you have fitness of your mind, you have fitness of your heart, you have fitness of your lungs, you have fitness of your muscles, you have fitness of your fascia, you have fitness of movement. How fit are you to move through multiple directions? Let's say, yeah, this is a great stepping stone tool to not have to amplify a ton of intensity because of the weight, but under your own command.
Right.
And so your intent is now creating tension. And if you can pay attention, your energy is your attention. And then you have an intent, you're putting energy into the intent. Let's say it's pulling apart. Can you feel what you're paying attention to in tension? Like, okay, there's something here. I don't know how to articulate it. I feel right here. Great. That's all I need. That you feel there. Because if you don't, we need to start establishing that afferent efferent pathway back by doing these reps until you feel the effort that you're able to put in. And typically, haven't had anybody do this for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 or 3 times and go, I didn't feel anything.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
And your number one sense that keeps you alive in this world is touch. You don't need to see, you don't need to taste, you don't need to smell, you don't need to hear. But if you can't touch, you can't feel, are you even alive? Right? So let's tap back into this sensory response that's keeping us alive and vital. And then if we can use that, there isn't necessarily a one pass shot. There might be a few series of movements that you find are valuable for you, and then you kind of keep what you want and let go of what you don't. But it's always funny to me when people are like, oh, it's just such a silly tool, I don't want to use it. It's like, get out of your own way, dude.
Oh,
just
sure.
try something for a second. If you don't like it, did you gain something from it at least?
Right. So,
I have a handful of people who don't want to use the ropes at all, but it's more of a,
I get it.
I don't want to be an early adopter. I don't want to be the person who, when everybody's doing it, okay, I'll probably do it. But if everybody's doing it first, I don't want to be in there in that mix.
Yeah.
What kind of shit you trying to pull on me? It's not magic. It's connection.
Right.
I guess it's magical.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. And I've had very similar experiences. I had one guy just, I handed it to him. I showed him what we're going to do, and he just tossed it right back to me. He's like, no, thanks. I'm like, all right. So, I try to create similar intent there through different things, through a different tool, something that was maybe more comfortable or, whatever it was. But so having said that, man, like we got about 12 minutes remaining here. Okay. can we go through some of it? Can we go through whether you want to go through the strides, rides, and crossovers, or maybe some of the like spherical reach in terms of a standing position that you take people through in facility? Can we just spend about the last 10, 11 minutes here just kind of working through that? All right.
Yeah.
Let's get after
it. Yeah. Your view will probably be better for people. I got a small room right here that I'm working through. So I'll kind of talk through positions to be able to just listen to it too and get yourself to something similar.
For sure. I'm going to lock in the camera that way.
So we're going to start with a posterior lunge type 2 opposite side rotation reach. Just kidding. Get complex early on. I'm joking. So let's go into that wide base. Let's make it really complex off the bat. All right. Hands are just outside shoulder width. Nice grip. Soften your body. Don't put any effort in. Just hang out here. Get your booty back. Get a little squat. And then I want you to apply about 10% pulling on the rope, like you're trying to pull your hands apart. And try to pull your elbows down and into your hips. So it's just going to kind of start to engage that posterior side and even the sides of our body. We'll just hold for about 5 more seconds. Give it a little bit more intensity. Pull it a little harder. You might get a little shaky. And then just go and slowly relax and stand up from there. Okay, the second time we're going to go through, I want you to squat a little bit deeper. So drop into your squat, knots at your heart, or the middle of that towel's at your heart. I want you to bring your butt down and back, chest more forward, like you're getting ready to jump or pounce. Let's bring the toes straight ahead. And now give me about 30% rip, and we're going to slowly climb up to 50, 70, and 90% in 10 seconds. So keep going, but gradually apply more force. Breathe. 5, 4, maximize it. 3, 2, 1, slowly ease off.
Wow.
So a little, that's slow.
Yeah,
what do you feel?
That's one that I don't normally do, especially with toes forward and that depth of squat. But my left hand, left elbow, almost feeding to rib cage. I felt like I had to try really hard to get it to be like, hey, what's going on there? So immediate feedback. Yeah. So dude, this is
perfect.
Awesome. Let's go.
So let's go a third set, but I want you to try and symmetricize the effort. So if you feel one side, can you steer tension through either a hand pulling a little differently? And just go 10 seconds. Again, we'll go from 30% up to a full 100% in 10 seconds. Okay. So settle in, kind of get ready. Toes are forward. We have a squat, booty back, chest forward, like you're getting ready to jump. Go ahead and amplify that tension. 10 seconds starts now. Keep going. Try to find symmetry in the sides. Pull a shoulder blade back or both shoulder blades back, chin down. 3, maximize. 2, softly release and come out of that. So I like the soft release too. Because a lot of times what happens is people amplify their tension, then just let up, and then all the slack is in the system, and then something kind of ends up out of whack. So when I'm guiding this, typically it's like, let's go hard. And then I don't say, okay, we're done. It's kind of like we're counting down. Now softly release out of it. And that could be a great way to just be like, oh, okay, I still feel the work versus shut out and my body fell back into another position. So now let's go ahead and go into a stride stance. So you got right foot forward, left foot back. And you got back heel up a little bit, but the ball of the foot's connected. That front foot fairly straight ahead, and try to bring your knee on top of the toes. And then bring your body forward with your chest so your heart is almost over your knee. And we're just going to go ahead and reach to knee height. A little pull, about 20% effort. Once those arms are straight, pull back to your chest, extend the spine and reach as high as you can. Don't lose your leg position, but find the extension through the torso. At the highest point, apply a little bit of tension as you look up. And then come back to your chest, and we'll go one more time. Knee height, arms go straight. Give it a good rip, maybe a little harder this time. Feel the back of the shoulders. Come back up to the heart, light tension. Find the full extension up top, look up. Rip it apart a little harder. Underneath the armpits, working there. Shoulders, 3, 2, softly come back to your heart, and then come up from there. So we just did a lot of upper body work, but while we stabilize the lower. So the lower, like the quads, get a little bit of action. Now you can kind of steer that and help people get more hamstring, glute based on how the hip is positioned. But I think just getting them into a stride and getting that leg to warm up is money. So let's go other side, same thing. So left foot stride, right heel up. Heavy front foot, knee is forward over the toes. I like that. So it gives the calf some length on the soleus. And then go ahead and take it down to knee height. Pull it apart about 10 to 20% effort. Once the arms are straight, couple second hold, light tension up vertically through your chest, and then get extension through the torso, full extension lift. Look up at about 10 to 20% pull. Softly transition through the middle. So you're trying to create a vertical line or a vertical path for the rope. Get the chest, now roll your body over the top. Go to knee height, pull harder. 3, 2, softly come back up through that vertical line, all the way up to that full extension. Get high with it. And then at the highest point, rip it apart, look up. 3, 2, softly come back through heart, and then step out of there. So a lot of calf, foot, anchoring stability. Now, just doing 1 or 2 of those can be plenty, right? But for somebody who's kind of learning it, it might be a smaller stride, less tension, do a couple more reps just to get familiar, because you might be losing a ton of balance. As soon as you apply tension, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I went sideways. And it's telling you there's probably an imbalance in the connection. When you go to apply tension, one side fires up faster. So you might notice a hand kind of jolt. And you're like, that's just information. But by doing the drill again and again, you can start to hone in on stopping that before it happens, so that you can now disrupt the path or the pattern of least resistance and go, what am I trying to create? And I'm going to go only as quick as my body allows the creation of that. Okay. So I like the stride one with that, but then also going into the stride and rotation. So if you go, actually, before we get into rotation, I want to talk about this arrow position, because it is kind of funky. The arrow position, if you're starting at your heart, we're just going to kind of pull the rope all the way to the right side. And you're going to feel your left elbow kind of come up, make it in line with the rope. And then as you run out of room, roll your right fist down so the rope sits right on top of the elbow pit area. And that's going to create now a long line of tension where one shoulder blade is wrapping around the rib cage, the other one's pulling in towards the spine. So your right side shoulder blade went towards your spine, your left shoulder blade wrapped around. So we're creating some of this rotational movement, and we just transition slowly, come back through center, and then take it the other way, and then roll that fist at the end of that tension. And the great thing about this is, as you roll through this, you might find, wow, my elbow dropped down. Okay, we lost shoulder tension. Let's take that elbow back up, and now we're able to create more of that pulling force, right? Or if we take the elbow too high, it's like, oh, I'm doing too much elevation. Let's find the neutral state and just allow the hand to kind of pull and roll the fist, and that gets the fascia really long through the thumb side. So it creates this really long, rigid line versus kind of a limp wrist. And so as you do that, now we're going to add rotation. So if you haven't, let's go to your arrow to the right. Okay. So right fist rolls, left elbow's at shoulder height. Now from there, use your right hand to open to your right. Feel free to let everything go, even let your left foot pivot to give you more rotation. And see how far you can go with your hips, your thoracic spine, your shoulders. And then when you hit the limit, turn your head to look towards that hand and hold that and breathe, so that we're establishing a safe position. If we can breathe in that position and stabilize it, we can own it. And then come back around through center slowly. Roll an arrow to your left side. Boom. Once you're there, keep that line. Now use your torso, your hips, your shoulder, your head to rotate. Maybe you rotate and then you allow the right foot to pivot. That'll give you further rotation and torque. So this is actually working along a diagonal fascial line. When you're doing your left arrow, we're elongating that right front hip to left hand, or the right foot to left hand, kind of anterior diagonal, but also working a spiral tension of the fascia from your left leg, butt side, backside, to the front of your left chest. So those spirals and diagonals of tension work anytime you're throwing, striking, kicking, but like anything that you're doing that's dynamic with your upper body, lower body, running, it's going to involve these fascial slings, these tensions. If you look at like Tom Myers anatomy train stuff, that's great. But all we're doing is just applying tension along the line, so that our body kind of has this connect from foot to hand. And we can recognize when our body loses full body tension, we get a little off balance, we get out of position. A lot of times what happens is we'll start here, we'll rotate, and this elbow starts to lift up, and we end up reaching down. And it's like, well, that's a good move if we're trying to do that. But if we're trying to go straight and your body goes, I have to go here, it's telling us there might be some issue in your full body's ability to rotate. Maybe it's an issue, maybe it's coordination, and your body's just preferring to do it a certain way. We can't assume what it is. We need to test for what it is. So we can then give a cue of, can you keep that at shoulder height? Yeah, I can, but when I do that, I get a big jamming in my hip or back. Oh, okay. When we're trying to create tension from this position, the body doesn't like it. So right now we're doing it slowly and building an awareness. If you're in real life outside the gym and you're moving quite quickly or reactively, subconsciously, your body's not going to have time to articulate a better path. It's going to avoid what hurts as best it can. So you might be having these holding patterns or bracing patterns that you would have never known about. You just feel like, man, when I do this thing, it hurts. Okay, well, when we take it to the coil rope and do that reach, we can actually recreate the discomfort that your body's been avoiding. And now if we can do this motion again and again, and the discomfort goes down, guess what's going to probably happen when you visit something like that position where your body braces, but now it's established as safety, and you go, whoa, boy, I'm good. I didn't hurt. What the heck's going on? Right. So it's kind of like creating this safety belt, in a sense, a safety belt of tension, so that your body has this information in case it needs it.
Right.
But you would never, I mean, some people will never really know because they don't really take any risks or anything physically. You know, it's kind of like if you didn't wear a seatbelt in your car and you never got in an accident, you never know the power of a seatbelt.
Right.
But if you were wearing a seatbelt and you got in a car accident and you got hurt, what would have happened if you didn't wear your seatbelt? Right. We may not have made it. Okay, so this is kind of like, think of this tension. Like, we can't really say exactly directly how it's helping you, but we know indirectly your body's developing a better way of communicating in space, and we're revealing and exploiting some of those spaces your body probably wouldn't choose to go. And if your body did go there, you may end up getting hurt. We can't necessarily say, we don't want to put that on somebody, but somebody as a coach's mind, we want to understand that this is possible. So what this can help do is, I don't want to say it prevents injuries, but it helps give your body better opportunities to not hurt itself, because it chose a path of least resistance because it had no other option.
Right.
So those little, just the ups and downs, I mean, the holds, the ups and downs and rotations, that's going to work through so many individual pieces that we could talk to individuals, just talk about diagonals, talk about spirals, or just talk about planar movement in general. It's hitting all the above. We're just doing it through tension and moving through space. And we could even play with the arrows and holding an arrow and say, let's take the arrow to the sky, take the arrow to the ground. So we're positioning the shoulders and then working on an axis, maybe in rotation, right, maybe in lateral bending, or maybe in extension and in flexion with that tension. Right. So if we can just continue to expose, if we go into the 3D, the lunge matrix and spherical reaches, that targets a lot of potential issues that could arise if you just had like 2 or 3 drills that targeted some spots, right? But if we're working through teaching the proprioceptors how to communicate when we're going through sagittal movement, frontal movement, rotational movement, triplane movement, different speeds, different tensions, different intensities, our body's now more well equipped for whatever it's gonna be faced with, and better prepared than if we didn't. And we might be okay without it, but we'll probably be even better with it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yes to everything. Right. Yes. But hey, I appreciate that. And I mean, look, like I said, I've been using this for what feels like close to 2 years now, and even inside of that, just going into the arrow, the left side was definitely talking, but going into, or there was a lack of communication, I had to try and talk to it a little bit more. But going into that arrow and bringing that thumb down, I thought I had got there. You know, like I thought I had hit that position, right? And you said something, and you were like, and just take it down till you start to really get that line from the thumb. And then I just was like, maybe there's more, right? So I just started to go a little bit more, and then literally like the top part of my shoulder just started like lighting up, like bing, bing, bing. And I'm like, man,
unkink the slink, dog.
Right, exactly. Like that's one of those things where I'm like, I've been doing it for how long, but you can always just fine tune, or like you said several times, calibrate what it is that you're trying to do. What's the intent? What are you going after? Like, what is the line of tissue that you're trying to lengthen or talk to or whatever? So, man, yeah, dude, it just I see, this is it though. Like this, so this is why I want to be able to bring this here to Florida, to this community. This is why I've really been trying to like show it a little bit more around these parts. But I mean, I do appreciate the time, CJ. I appreciate kind of going in depth, and I know from the standpoint of what is possible here. I know we kept it fairly simple and we didn't go through too much, but I know the infinitude. I know what, I know that there's an unknown amount of ways to move with this. So I do appreciate the time, man. I appreciate kind of just breaking down the priming, breaking down just kind of starting to create awareness in the sphere, starting to, help people create or at least become more aware of the balance in life from left to right. And then different types of tension and context for everyone. Dude, yeah. So look, like this is I'm going to close it up here, but this is something that I hope we continue to just discuss. And I'm always going to be kind of like the guinea pig type of mindset where I'm always going to want to work through something and be like, what shows up here. So I hope that we continue to do this. I look forward to what you're going to bring out, whether it's end of this year, going into next year, or shoot, next 10 years, whatever. But yeah, man. I mean, because like the list of things that I have on what the Coil Rope has done for me, from a personal standpoint, it's like I have a full page and a half of thoughts and feelings and experiences and how I want to include it. So it's like, if I can get from where I was to where I am now and have a decent idea of where I want to go and know that this is part of it, I really want to be able to give it to practitioners, to communities, whatever, man. So I do appreciate your willingness to explore, because that ultimately is like, right? Hey, Bay is going to send you a rope, right? All right, and now we have something that I believe is an incredibly amazing, awesome tool. So yeah, man, I appreciate it, CJ. Always, dude. Always appreciate the time. So thanks for hopping on, and yeah, we'll
Yeah,
chit
man.
chat. Yeah.
I appreciate you. And from one explorer to another, man, this is how things kind of start breaking ground. And I think with this wave of movement, there's a lot of just open air of where this can go, and it can be kind of bewildering for a lot of people. Of like, that just seems like too much. I'm gonna get lost, and it can happen. But this is something that can pull it all together.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not like I get it. It's kind of like, oh, I learned something. Oh, I learned something. Oh, I learned something. And it may not even be in words. It's just I learned something about my body, or a way to connect with it I haven't. Or, man, that opened up. I did this thing, and now my heart feels freer. Like I can be here with my family. Like I just feel excited. If we can elicit more joy, we can create more opportunities and experiences to be open and just share what we feel, especially when it's physically focused, and it can open up some emotional pathways and stuff too. Like I've certainly pulled this thing and like, just I'm like pissed, right? About something. I don't know what's going on, but I'm just like pull it apart. I'm like, okay, I was able to express my emotion in a very safe way. And I recognize I had to get through this little block, and I squeezed it out, and now I could feel it fully and let it process, versus I let my body hold it, embrace it, and hide it. And that's going to keep building up until I can't avoid it. It's just going to be there. So this is something that can continue to flush out the system. And there's a lot of right ways to do it, man. Not a lot of wrong ways.
Right on. Yes. Right on. All right. Audience, for those that may be interested in Coil Rope course, or just looking to get a Coil Rope, or where can that happen? And I'll put links up in the description. But is there like a go-to place?
Yeah, right now the Coil Ropes are only available either in person at Gymnazo in San Luis Obispo, or on our Gymnazo shop. So you can check out my link tree. If you just go to gymnazo.com, there's a shop on there too with our stuff, and it's on there.
Okay. Right on. All right, I'll put that in the description. All right, man. Hey, I appreciate it. Get back to your Wednesday, man, and we'll chit chat soon. All right.
Talk soon, brother. Much love.
All right, CJ.
See you, buddy.